different. Today we're going to start off with Elaine Erichson, who is going to read to us her father's ethical will.
He was interested in all things Judaica and did lecture when he was retired along those lines. But the ethical will was something that he had a very, very particular interest in. So I'll give you a brief introduction to ethical wills in general. Can I see a show of hands? Has anybody ever heard of an ethical will or knew people who wrote them? Oh, so we have a few. Okay, quite a number actually. I have not in general heard of it. This is a book called Ethical Wills, A Modern Jewish Treasury. And I will tell you that my father's ethical will appears in it. He did not know it was going to be published. My father enjoyed writing, and when he liked something that he had written, he tended to send it out to most of the family. And so this went to a cousin of mine in California who showed it to his rabbi, and his rabbi was one of the editors of this book of ethical wills, and he included it. My father was very pleased to see it in published form. So I will tell you that this is only the third time that I am reading it aloud. The first time was in the presence only of my brother and my mother the night that my father passed away. And after that, my mother said, yeah, I think you should read this at his funeral, which I did. And so this is a treat for me to be reading it again. And as I said to Judy, my father will be quelling up in heaven. I will tell you just a little about what they wrote about ethical wills. The people who published this, who edited it, one is a rabbi and one is a professor of Jewish education. Just briefly, when we think of a will, we usually think of a legal document intended to divide up one's property and provide financial security for one's heirs. But there is another kind of will that has long been in use in Jewish history, and its aim is to bequeath a spiritual legacy. Those who write ethical wills, often parents writing letters to their children, try to sum up what they have learned in life and to express what they want most for and from their loved ones. Ethical wills are precious spiritual documents, windows into the souls of those who write them. They are left behind in the belief that the wisdom acquired in a lifetime is as much a part of a family's legacy as are all of its material possessions. And I'll say that this book is divided into 4 sections: traditional wills. And I want to mention that although these traditional wills are, I think, started beginning with the 20th century, the first ethical wills of a sort are in the Bible, they're oral, starting with Jacob, who collected his family together as he was dying, so he could tell them the kind of life that he wanted them to live. And it goes on, Moses as well did something similar, and others in the Torah. The next section they have is Holocaust wills, which could break your heart, really. Those are all very brief. They're written when people knew that, their end was coming very soon. I'm sorry, before that they have traditional wills, that are just older form wills that are, very much taken up with traditional Jewish ideas. And then they have the Holocaust wills, and then modern wills. And my father's is included in those modern wills. The book was published, I think, in 1983. So that was modern at that time.
Elaine, can you send the name of the book or a picture of it?
Yes, and you know, I believe that there is a copy that somebody had donated in the Judaica library at the JCC. I think somebody in honor of, I don't know, our family donated a copy of this.
It's no longer JCC. It was part of our organization there, so that we have it in storage.
Oh,
we do not. It doesn't exist anymore. The library at the JCC.
Oh, too bad. Okay, well, I'll tell you the name of it. It's called Ethical Wills. This is all in English, no Yiddish. Ethical Wills, subheading A Modern Jewish Treasury. The editor and annotated by Jack Reamer, R-I-E-M-E-R, and Nathaniel Stampfer, S-T-A-M-P-F-E-R. Both very, very knowledgeable in Judaica. So here we go with my father's ethical will. Now, unlike the what they're saying is traditional, his is dated this 59th birthday, and he lived to be 80, the 15th day of February, 1965. So this was something, he was probably just learning about ethical wills and decided this was as good a time as any to write one. The editors wrote this about his 2-page ethical will. Emil Greenberg's will contains a rare combination of literary style of high quality with fervent devotion to the Jewish heritage and its continuity. After a brief introduction to ethical wills, the writer loosely sets forth his legacy of intangibles. And when my father did see that, he loved that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just read it straightforward. Okay, the ancient Hebrew tradition of an ethical will, quote, a legacy of intangibles, as characterized by Stephen Vincent Benet, has regrettably fallen into disuse. I presume that it is a matter of values. The monies and properties, the tangible assets we bequeath have solid corporeal material value. And in these hurtling times, what are the real values of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers? I'm going to stop for a moment and ask, is there anyone here who has in fact written an ethical will for their family? No, I haven't either. I have thought about it, but I haven't. Okay. Nevertheless, an anachronistic but stubbornly persisting insight and foresight impel me to give, devise, and bequeath unto my progeny, and perhaps to their progeny, the conscious presence of a sense of ethics, a continuity and tradition of a way of life. So here we take inventory of precept instead of property, of concern instead of cash, of love in lieu of legacy. I am humbly grateful that this inventory includes such great contributions from your family forebears. It is no smugness that evaluates the unassuming goodness of my mother, my grandma, and the twinkling kindliness of my father, that's my grandpa. But the inheritance they left was more than pervading goodness. They handed down a great hunger, a hunger for knowing, for inquiring, for helping, a many-faceted hunger. I earnestly believe they handed down to their sons, 4 of them, their encompassing concern for everyone in every station of life, augmented by the opportunities afforded by that education in the professions for which they strove so indomitably. They were able to educate their sons, although they themselves were not educated. Complete financial disaster was just an obstacle, never a deterrent. So the family tradition of love for learning, which an unschooled mother had inculcated so well, I would that I could too. It is also in our Hebrew tradition the choice of a people who chose the book instead of the brand, the Torah, not terror. But even learning can become sophistry. It would be the greatest of ironies if the ceaseless search for knowledge were to find its goal in submergence under the smothering quicksand of conversion and conformity. The threat of obliteration is urgently real and deadly. When you wonder why you are and should remain Jews throughout the generations, always remember as your heritage, millennia old, the unbroken continuity and tradition literally paid for in blood and torture, pogrom and Bergen-Belsen. It isn't just an unbroken chain, it is a lifeline. However, you cannot just feel it. You must also know it, study it, and you must share identity with every Jew who ever suffered and died for Kiddush Hashem. Lives are not always grand, nor are they epic. We interweave vignettes of small talk, little gestures, minor favors, and family folkways, so that we do not live alone within our solitary selves. No people are all bad or all good. When you degrade or derogate others, your own stature is correspondingly lessened. Okay. Seek graciousness. It is the lubrication of civilized life. It makes the essential harshness and ruthlessness and crudity of truth easier to live with when it cannot be solely lived for. However, you should also remember that graciousness is a way to life, but not by itself a way of life. Here, your Hebrew heritage becomes manifest. Other civilizations, the Sumerian, the Chaldean, the Babylonian, the Egyptian, the Hellenic, the Roman, were cultured and grandiose, hedonistic and amoral. It was the ethical gadfly of your irritant, uncompromising Hebrew ancestor prophets, which gave high purpose and meaningfulness to civilization and its cultures. In our present fabulous era of wondrous change and achievement, each little ego becomes literally overwhelmed. Without fundamental guidelines and basic roots in a family heritage, each of us, in the words of Clarence Darrow, quote, is not the captain of his soul and the master of his fate. He is just a hapless deckhand on a rudderless raft, aimlessly adrift in a limitless sea, close quote. If I can bequeath something of my concept of mores and aspirations, distilled, if I can bequeath something of my concept of mores and aspirations, distilled of its inevitable portion of baseness and frailty, so that my children and their issue may partake in some measure of high hope and heritage, to that degree, a whisper of immortality becomes mine and yours. And I have to say, I read this over a couple of times in preparation for this reading, and I so appreciate the opportunity to do that, because I'm reading it now at a different age. Now, my father was, he says 59, I'm 83. It means a lot more to me now than it did, you know, years ago. So I don't know if this is this a first for everybody to hear any ethical will?
It is for me. I never even heard of it.
Yeah, well, I know there was a class once. I think the JCC had a class in the writing of ethical wills quite a while ago. I think so, maybe. I'm not even sure. But, you know.
We were told that the Jewish Historical Society had a program many years ago on ethical wills. And it might have been at the JCC. So that's why you think it was the JCC.
Okay, that's probably it. My father actually did give lectures in a few different places about ethical wills and the concept of it. As he says, it was an ancient tradition. Some of it, you know, was kind of was a standard format of, you know, what was your Jewishness that you were passing on, and some of it was limited, and then later ones got more flexible in what they were giving. I've thought about it. I don't know what I would write. I have thought about it. I don't know.
Elaine, what year was it? I was just going to say, what year was what year was it when your father was 59?
I think 1965. Wait a minute, now I lost my place.
I just wondered the era that he actually was writing, the glorious era he was writing about.
He was 1965.
I think it's very beautiful and very poetic.
Very meaningful.
It's very much his style of writing. He did sometimes use, I mean, his family sometimes made fun, as you do within a family, because he liked to use big words. And so, sometimes you kind of got caught up in the big words and had to figure out. So it was a help to me, having read this, you know, several times before, to get what he's at. So, you know, in his case, the continuation of Judaism is so important. You know, I had reactions to it now as an older person, another generation of responsibility, perhaps, you know, for have I taught this to my grandchildren? You know,
I wrote down what he said: smothering quicksands of conversion and conformity.
Yes, you got that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, you know, you don't necessarily get everything because his words are so big. But yes, and that's very important to him. And it's interesting because he really wasn't religious. You know, not in the traditional sense. Although he belonged to an Orthodox congregation, but my mother, you know, kept a kosher home. But he himself was not traditionally religious, and although his parents were. But
it was very beautiful.
Jewish was very important to him.
It really, it's a document that needs studying. You really need to analyze it carefully. It was jam-packed with wonderful ideas.
It was so touching. It really makes you start to think. I mean, my mind is beginning to go over, you know, this love for learning and the kindness. I think I may start writing a little something. I was so touched. Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad, because I think now, you know, it's really more meaning for me now than when I, you know, was had it out earlier.
Well, thank you so much for sharing Elaine. Thank you so much.
I just want to add one thing. I put another book in the chat, and it's by the same authors, Jack Reamer and Nathaniel Stamford. They wrote another book in 1991 called So That Your Values May Live On.
Oh.
As I put it in the chat. So anyway, and at the end of this book, they give a little chart with suggestions of what to write if you want to do that. And things like what were the formative events of my life, and this is the world from which I came, and some important lessons I learned in my life, and the people who influenced me the most, that kind of thing. And I'm writing this to you because, and the ethical ideals and practices that found expression in my life. And I'd like to echo what everyone else has already said. What a beautiful ethical will, what a beautiful document that you have. And we still have that book, Elaine. The Judaica Library, it may not be located where it was, but we still have it, and it will soon re-emerge in a new location. So be on the lookout for that. And I'd also, Elaine, like to ask your permission, since we did record what you said, if we could put that on our website so that we have it, so a little how-to about ethical wills. Would that be all right with you?
It certainly would be all right. As I said to Judy when we were talking about it, my father is quelling up in heaven.
Alyssa, I have a question about those authors. Were they members of the Ethical Culture Society?
No, Jack.
No, I mean, it's the word.
I think it's a good question.
Is there? It is. But I mean, the emphasis on ethics, I guess, it's the same word, but it has no connection. No
Rabbi Jack Reamer was in 1991. He was the rabbi of Congregation Beth David in Miami, and Nathaniel Stamford was at Spertus Jewish
California, because this.
Yeah, so that was 91.
California.
Yeah, so he was a very liberal rabbi and very involved with ethics. And Stamford was at Spertus College, which is a Jewish college in Chicago.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Elaine, for bringing this to our attention. It sure has generated a lot of interest, and it was very wonderful to hear you read it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.